everybody. I'm Alan Schimmel. Just kidding. I'm Mike Bizarre here. We're Techstrong Gang, and we're talking today about the FCC is mulling some disclosure rules for political ads. We're going to be talking about AI in the call center. And then finally, we're going to talk about Gen AI insecurity. Apparently, it's pretty easy to tease out some secrets from those Gen AI models. We'll be back in a minute. You're watching Techstrong Gang. All right, folks, and we're back with an all-star lineup. A lot of folks today happen to be in California. We have a guest, Lisa Martin, who's with CMO Advisor, an arm of Futurum Group, and she's out of San Jose. And then Alan and Mitch are traveling. They're at a conference in Santa Clara. So we have the three folks who got up pretty early this morning for this one. And then finally, we have Bonnie Schneider. Yes. And myself, of course, Mike Bizarre. And we're going to start talking about this first topic, which is the FCC is mulling AI disclosure rules for political ads. This may not come as much of a surprise, but Lisa, I'd like to get your sense of what is going on here with AI and advertising and videos. Yeah. We're going to need to label all these things and say this one was created with AI and this one wasn't, because frankly, I'm not entirely sure most ads are kind of lying anyway. So what difference does it make who created it?
That's true. I think when we see it come into the political arena, it gets really scary there. I think transparency, accountability is absolutely necessary. Now, what the FCC is proposing is not a prohibition of using AI. They simply want it to be disclosed. And we know that just a few months ago in New Hampshire, there was about 45,000 people that received robocalls sounding like President Biden, telling them not to vote in the primary to save their votes. So that's something that fooled a lot of people, and that accountability and transparency needs to be there. I support it. I'm a fan of AI, especially Gen AI as a marketer. I host a webcast series called Marketing, Art, and Science, and I get the opportunity to speak with CMOs every week. And they're all supporters of it as well, as long as it's done purposefully, with responsibility, and used for things like first drafts of content to really kind of get the creative juices flowing. So I think that it's an important tool that can really be very helpful, but it really needs transparency and accountability.
Yeah. So Mike, I don't disagree with everything Lisa said, but in regard to the instant case with the FTC and political ads and saying that everything that's AI needs to be labeled as AI, I'm reminded of the old gun rights kind of thing. If you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns, right? If you're going to say, hey, election rules say that you've got to label something AI, there will be a certain percentage of people that will follow that. But the dirty money, the dark money, the unregistered PACs, the foreign entities, they don't play by the rules. What's the sense? And so if they're not going to play by the rules, should anybody be forced then to play by the rules?
I have a pet theory on this, and I'll run it by Bonnie here for a minute.
Okay.
Well, eventually, will we not get to a point where there's so much content that is loaded with so much BS that nobody's going to believe anything? And maybe it would be good for us to be inundated with all this stuff so that we get to the point where everybody just kind of has a cognitive moment and says, all this stuff is nonsense, and just don't trust it from the get-go, because I think today we trust too much content.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think with the situation, especially when AI is able to do a deep fake of a political candidate, that's when you're running into trouble. I would imagine whoever's getting imitated. So there could be a solution of doing, I agree with Alan, it would be very tough to enforce, and some people will just ignore any rules that are out there. But there could be a way perhaps to do a hybrid solution where some AI is labeled and others isn't, or perhaps there's a way for more education to be out there for people that are consuming content. For example, the more of us that use ChatGPT, we kind of recognize when we see it. So if you see an article that looks, you know what I mean? You can sort of get that sense. Not everyone and not all the time, but as more people get familiar with AI, it's perhaps it won't be, like you were saying, as shocking or will fool as many people.
Mm-hmm. Strange adverbs was a dead giveaway for ChatGPT, right? Mitchell, is there a technology solution to this problem? Is there things that we can do to kind of maybe make it easier to identify AI content without labeling it, but, just give people some kind of capability to discern if they're interested.
So you're wondering, is there a Shazam of AI generated content, right? Like, what is this, right? Where did this come from? I'm serious, actually. I think something like that is probably what we're headed to very quickly. And I think I don't know, I read too many sci-fi books. Maybe we need our own detectors for content to say bing, 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 but then that's all that we'll get is warning labels that this was AI generated. I think, well, first of all, what's the rule going to be if you violate this, right? Hand slap. We can't even keep dark money out of politics and a lot of other, campaign finance rules enforced. So I'm not too optimistic about whatever regulation this might involve. I think one of the tricky parts about it is you may be watching something that who knows who put it together, that someone else tweeted or a political candidate shared on X or whatever platform. And there may be AI generated in one part of it. How do you know what part of it? Are we going to flash up a little sign that says this part's the AI part? Or was it all? I think it's just, I fell more into the camp of, I think it's all going to be not trusted. And we're going to rely on people that we trust, assuming that we know that it's actually them.
So first of all, what you guys are talking about, it kind of sounds like it's something out of Blade Runner, right? If you remember the Blade Runner movies, and they had that thing that you could look in the retina of a person and see if they were a replicant or whatever they called them.
Yeah.
It's impractical at this point in the game. But, Mitch, what you're describing is, well, I'm just going to believe who I trust, is exactly where we are now as a country. And look at the mess we're in as a result of it. Because what happens, we tend to trust people who say things we agree with. And so it reinforces our tribal differences, our tribal, allegiances, and it tends to rip apart the fabric of a country or of
society,
Western liberalism for that matter, right? And we need to figure out how to get people to trust media, to trust sources. I was at a lecture, Tuck Chod, who used to, host Meet the Press a couple of years ago. This is when he was still at Meet the Press. And he said that, we're going through a period, and he thought it was going to take 10 to 12 years where people were going to have to learn to discern quality from nonsense on social media. I think AI muddies the waters even more. But the interesting thing he said is that all of us on this show will never learn. It's the next generation. It's the natives, the digital natives, the AI native generation now who grow up with this, that will be better at, I don't know if they'll be able to identify AI, but they'll have better mechanisms to filter and authenticity. And I see it. I see it with young people who have been turned off to the Fox and CNN and MSNBC and Newsmax conundrum. They go on YouTube and TikTok and listen to people you probably never heard of, because those people tend, they think at least, not to politicize news, just to give it straight news with no bias one way or the other. And that's what they're craving. That's what they're looking for.
I think that's that generational awareness, because the younger generation will automatically know there's a possibility this is AI. Whereas once you start getting to older generation, they would be shocked. Like, what? This is AI? How can that be? Yeah. So I think there is going to be an awareness that comes up with younger people.
That's a great point, Bonnie, on the awareness piece. I think that's absolutely critical for more folks to start understanding that. The SEC is only talking about TV and radio ads, not talking about digital content, streaming content. So I like it. I bet your point is, all of your points are so valid in terms of the trust. And I think that's currency these days. And that's something that I think the more awareness that can happen across all generations in the working world today will be table stakes.
Right. I mean, it's conceivable that I could develop more trust for some sort of AI bot than I do for a person, right? I can think of a lot of people that I don't trust, but I might have interactions with an AI bot that's better. And I might ultimately trust that a little bit more, assuming I know how it was trained or I have some confidence in how it was trained. So just because it's artificial doesn't necessarily mean that it's not necessarily better. I know a lot of kids.
Mike, are you saying love is love here? What's going on? I think we
Back
should
to
end
Blade Runner?
Yeah.
You're talking about Blade Runner again.
I'm just saying, man, we should not judge.
No judging.
Far be it from me, Mike.
All right, folks, we're going to close this here because I'm not entirely sure that Alan isn't an AI thing because we're about 15 minutes into this and he hasn't waved his glasses once yet. So I'm not sure that that's happening. But we'll be back in a minute.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud-native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud-native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud-native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
All right, folks, we're back, and now we're talking about AI in the call center. And there's an article up on Techstrong AI talking about how these AI models are starting to find their way into this use case. I think it's a very good use case for AI initially, but I'll bring up this point too. My sister-in-law worked in a call center, just quit that job about a month and a half ago and just said it was too much stress. It was just constant people, having issues that she didn't have a playbook for, and the people measuring her performance were kind of like, getting it down to each call had to be flipped within a minute. Yeah. I mean, it's just, a little bit on the insane side. So maybe we finally reached a point in the call center where we absolutely do need AI. I mean, Lisa, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think it's a fantastic use case. It's funny because when I talk with folks in tech, which I do regularly as part of the media, people think chatbots. I actually don't think that. What I see it as is an opportunity to help train models and help it learn. And so maybe the next experience is better. But we're seeing on the customer experience front, definitely progress in that area. I think we're seeing shifting priorities. I think it can be an advantage to have virtual AI-powered assistance, customer experience, employee experience, closing calls faster, to your point, Mike, with the turn that your sister-in-law had to do. I think it's a good use case as long as it's done purposefully and responsibly and transparently.
Mitch,
Mike, I have a...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, what? Can I go?
Yep.
So I took off my glasses for you. I put something up on my Facebook page yesterday. I know I'm an old person, so I use Facebook. My kids tell me only people my age use Facebook. But it was a Pooh and Piglet thing because I'm a big Winnie the Pooh fan. And Pooh is very upset with the state of the world and what's going on. And he was looking for consolation from Piglet. And Piglet said, Pooh, I wish I could tell you everything's going to be okay, but it's not. But I'll be here with you every step of the way, and we'll get through this together the best we can, but I can't promise you anything. Well, this is the same thing here with these AIs, in this instant case. For too many people, we've been blowing smoke up their butt saying, don't worry about AI taking your job. AI is going to make you 10x more effective. It's going to free you up to do higher level things. AI is going to make you more effective, more efficient, and more valuable. Well, for a lot of people, it is going to do that. But there are going to be some jobs, like a call center kind of job, where quite frankly, AI does it better, faster, cheaper. They never take a sick day or a vacation, and their body of knowledge the body of knowledge in the AI is much greater than the individual who sits, behind a computer or on a head microphone. And you know what? Those jobs are toast. I'll be here every step of the way with you, Pooh, but you're not going to be a call center operator anymore. You should look for something else, because I think that is a job, as Lisa mentioned, where given the right training and body of knowledge, it's a natural to do that. Right. And to say, oh, we're not going to put AIs in there because we want to preserve these people's jobs.
I think you have to look hard at who is actually saying that about AI, because it's always invariably the tech company that doesn't want to be perceived as the job killer. So they go out of their way to say, these awesome things about these new roles and capabilities. And there will be some of that. And there might even be more net new jobs at the end of the day. But it's not going to Alan's point, going to happen without a certain amount of trauma into the system. It's just the way things are going to go, and it's just going to be part of the issue. And it may affect older people more than younger people, but it may be harder to get into a new job area for younger people because there is no entry-level job. You got to have 5 years of experience doing stuff, and that's going to be harder to come by. Mitch, what, in the IT set, what are you guys seeing in terms of, what do you think the expectations for skills are going to be?
Well, I think one of the benefits of using AI in this use case is we at least won't have listen to the message of, by the way, did you know you can do all this on our website? Well, now I can just do it here with a bot. I don't have to go to the website. I think it's an inevitable application of it. Call centers are notoriously expensive, and they're highly scripted, closely managed and measured, but it doesn't mean that they're successful a lot. I think the current crop of bots, for the most part, are very limited in what they can actually do, and there's potential for having more helpful results from that experience. There's always going to have to be someone, or maybe a higher level bot or a person that you can escalate to that. The question is, where does all this training come from, and how do we train domain specific information about our business? A call center for a telecommunications service to business, B2B, it's going to be much different than how do I pay my credit card bill and I want to dispute this service or something like that. So I think that's where the domain of how do we learn to do that, and how we do we do it effectively? Do we have to figure it out ourselves, or are there going to be a crop of companies that are really good at training models for business call centers, and we'll effectively outsource the whole thing into some digital world with some level of escalation to a human?
I agree. I think that one of this is going to be a true test of how does AI compare to real human emotion? Because when people are calling a call center, typically they're upset about something and they want to speak to the supervisor. They want to escalate, as Mitch mentioned. So how do you have to train the AI to deal with any potential emotion that the caller might have, and whatever they're saying, different responses. Now I think we're seeing that now, where they do have canned responses, but this is where it's going to be really tricky, because if somebody's calling and they're upset and suddenly they say, wait, are you a real person? I think that's what they're trying to avoid.
Open the call center door, Hal. Hey, Lisa, what is your advice to tech companies in terms of how to position AI? Because as we said earlier, it seems like it's a little, there's a disconnect, shall we say, as Alan pointed out, between reality and what the tenor and the tone of the message is from some of the larger tech companies. Is there work that needs to be done there?
Definitely. As a marketer and a glass half full person, I see things like AI in the call center, or even AI applications across organizations for faster processes, better processes, more creative processes, as a lot of advantages in there. And when I think of the call center, I think of, improved customer experience, reduced wait times. Obviously, there's a lot of frustration. It's very controversial. I think the opportunity there for tech companies is to be honest about what they're using, how they're using it. Lonnie brings up a great point about the emotion. And that's where I think humans still have to be in the mix to be able to deliver that. Because you're right, people are calling in the call center, they're upset about something and they want it resolved as quickly and as painlessly as possible, especially like a credit card dispute or something. But I think tech companies need to be really honest, upfront, transparent, like I keep saying, authentic, and explaining how they're using it, why they're using it, and what's in it for me as a customer. How is it going to make my life better? That's what I would want tech companies to be able to deliver.
All right. Alan, honesty? Do we need a little more honesty in the system? I mean, you kind of started this conversation. So how does, in your ideal world, what does that honesty look like?
It's common sense. I think honesty is common sense. I had this conversation once with a professor at Indiana University. I forgot the business school there. It's a really fine business school at Indiana. I forget the name of it. My son was accepted. And it was around the minimum wage question. right? He said, we don't want minimum wage laws in this country because it takes jobs away, right? Because if we raise the minimum wage where it's cheaper to automate something, employers will automate it rather than hiring people. And so it's going to cost people's jobs if at that time we were talking about the $15 an hour minimum wage. And my retort was, if you're doing a job that can be replaced, it was the Kelly School, by the way, Mitch put it in there, and it's an excellent business school, one of the top in the country. But if you're doing a job that can be replaced through automation, and as an employer, I could do it cheaper, faster, better with, in this case, AI, I'd have rocks in my head not to do that, right? It's called capitalism, right? And you don't want to make work jobs. This isn't the Great Depression and the Tennessee Valley Authority. If AI could do a job better than a person can, the market's going to dictate that we use AI for it. So what I say is, it's common sense. You got to look at what is it I do? And I had this conversation with my own children. I have it with every intern we hire here at Techstrong. What effect do you think AI is going to have on your chosen career path in the next 5 years? If what you were planning to do can be easily done by an AI chatbot or, whatever it morphs into, talking to it. But if AI can do what you're going to do, because it's basically repetitive kind of work like that, think of something else. Think about how you could leverage that AI to do something else. Maybe similar, related, but if you're just handling customer complaint calls at a call center, I wouldn't be aspiring to collecting a pension on that job at this point, right? Because I think, common sense dictates that that's going to be something that will be handled there. It's the same thing we probably all had friends who were bank tellers growing up, right? Bank teller was a lot of married women, back then, because, it was a decent job for a married woman who was thought. You go to work in a bank. Who has bank tellers now? Even when those rare occasions when you walk into a bank, you're there to either see someone at like the desk, a manager or someone, or you go to the machine instead of the teller. So I think you got to use common sense here. It's not some evil thing. It's not some evil plot to destroy the proletariat or something. It's just, this is technology. And AI is just the latest, phase of it.
Lisa, flip this on its head a little bit. Do you think a lot of the people who may find that they're being automated out of a job will then just take AI and go launch their own company to provide the capability that they were previously employed for? And we're just going to see this explosion of entrepreneurs who are going to run around with AI and just say, yeah, I don't need a big company to do that for you. I'll do it myself. And here's the fee.
I wish I would say yes, but I don't think that's reality. I think that the folks who aren't going to take the opportunity to be upskilled, who are going to be phased out in part by what AI can do better, faster, cheaper, I don't think that's the mindset of a person that is going to have their own ideas and take it on and create something. I wish that was the case, but I think if we just look at the general population, I think that's not.
People are not that motivated or that entrepreneurial. But let's look at media, for instance, right? Look, I grew up in New York City, so we were very lucky, right? We had, like you did too, from the Bronx, right? We had channel 13, 11, 9, 7, 5, 4, and 2. So we had 7 TV channels. A lot of people, Mitchell grew up in Nebraska. He probably only had 3 or 4 channels, right? And then cable came, and I don't mean anything wrong by it, Mitchell.
Hey,
you knew more about Husky.
No, we got WGN, and the world was our oyster.
Right? Yeah. No. Yeah. So, but then cable came, and all of a sudden we had 100 channels or 72 channels or whatever you paid for, and then the internet came. And now everybody's a broadcaster and everybody's a media person and everybody has their own, channel. Right? So can you do a similar thing with AI? Yes, but to Lisa's point, you got to be motivated and entrepreneurial to want to do that. Generally speaking, the person who wants to work, let's say, at a call center or a bank teller job, and that, is what they're looking for, they're not going to go do what we want, what we're talking about here. It's the way of the world, unfortunately.
Alan, there's a whole other factor here, I think, that is possible, and that's the data. So the people who have sitting on all this data from all these recordings from call center, the data, the interactions and what happened, that's a huge plus for someone else who's brand new to that space, right? I'm going to go do my own thing and just create a chatbot to do this myself. Well, if I have all this data from years of operating a call center, and now I have the tools to analyze it, not just analytically, but, turn voice into text and do the text analysis with Gen AI, I can train models much more quickly to do more things and analyze successful outcomes versus non-successful or desired or non-desired, whatever it might be, versus starting up from scratch and just having a model that, functionally works, but I don't really have the experiential data to train it. I've got to go find some way to train that. I think that's a huge advantage for people who are already doing this function, the business, not necessarily the workers, but can't forget about the data.
All right, folks, we're going to be back in a minute. I'm going to parse some lucky to grow up in the Bronx in the 70s and the 80s thing with Alan there because, I'm having all kinds of flashbacks right now, but we'll be back in a minute. Hello, everybody. We're back and we're talking about Gen AI insecurity. It turns out the folks at Immersive Labs ran a test and they had like 31,000 people participating in this thing and they hid a secret in the LLM. It was basically some social security number and a couple other things. There was like 10 different levels and almost 80% of the time the LLM was tricked, shall we say, into coughing up the secret. So it appears to turn out that, Mitch, maybe you have a thought here, that LLMs can keep a secret about as well as a 5-year-old. So can we make business around that?
Well, this is actually something that came up. We did a day at RSAC recently, and we had the CISOs from OpenAI and a number of different organizations. And it came up about this prompt injection of not only getting data out of the model, like things like social security number, and there's ways that they can filter that through the prompt engineering or the training of the model itself, but also disclosing what the model knows. If you query it enough, you can, and you build enough prompts that you've engineered to tease out what the model knows, you can actually start to disclose things that might be considered IP about the organization, how it functions. So imagine you're an attacker and saying, where are the vulnerabilities? Where's kind of the low-hanging fruit to go after these people? And the ability to slow roll engineer prompts into a model, into a service or a bot or whatever it might be. So it actually is a new attack vector from a security standpoint. I think it's one we're early in understanding because we barely know how to engineer prompts and more or less protect them. So I think we're going to see a lot of discussion about this as being a big, not only data leakage, but also attack surface.
Alan, what's your take on this? Because I think, it's cause for pause, at least for a second, because we got to think about what data is actually going into these LLMs and we historically have never thought about what data goes into what application. We just kind of went with it.
I don't think this is anything different than many, many other technology waves we've seen. When people are deciding, designing their AIs and how they're going to utilize the LLMs, one of the top 3 things they're not thinking about is, well, how secure is this, right? We will get better security in our LLM data when the consumers and the users of the LLMs demand better security. Right now, they just, they're enamored with the parlor trick, with the, magical, auto-magical nature of these things. And I don't think security is getting the attention it may get later on. And security will get important eventually. Like I said, when people say they need it and they want it and they demand it, then they'll do it.
It could be connecting the dots. I think that's right. Like, for security to be at the forefront, something has to happen. But maybe because it's coming from an LLM, then to the user, we weren't going to see it right away. It could be a subtle thing where the user then takes an action which makes them less secure, and they don't put 2 and 2 together and realize, wait a minute, where did I get that advice to do this that came from an LLM?
Lisa, do you think that this is a marketing nightmare in the brewing here? Because, in about 4 or 5 months, there might be an issue. And the first thing we're all going to agree on is that it's the tech company's fault.
Right. Finger pointing, it's going to happen for sure. I think it highlights the importance of rigorous testing, validation, and the development of AI-powered systems for any company. I also think, though, that there's opportunity for innovation. What we're seeing here now with the flaws, and Mitch brought up a great point about being another attack surface. Ransomware attacks happen every 11 seconds. But I think the discovery of these flaws that Immersive Labs has uncovered is really providing opportunities for organizations to be more innovative, more aware. I think that awareness piece is so critical, especially when security is concerned, because people are often the weakest link. And now we're having demonstrative AI secrets being revealed. But I think that for organizations, tech companies, I think, and this will spread to other industries as well, leveraging AI-powered security testing, monitoring, trading, consulting is really where this can go, to be a positive thing, to acknowledge, yes, we have an issue here. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to innovate, learn from it, and start reducing security risks. I don't think they're going to go away. They can be hopefully dialed down.
On that testing front that you're talking about, Lisa, certainly something that will emerge is pen testing for models, right? And prompt testing, just like we do pen testing for networks. I'm kind of curious about tying a thread back to our previous conversation about AI generated or misinformation, disinformation. We could actually have offensive responses to attacks that we can confirm they're actually an attack. Alan and I have been in the industry where it was like, do we block this attempt to attack our network, or do we block this IP? Do we set it on auto, or do we just kind of let a person deal with it? Imagine a day where the model's responding in a different way because it thinks this is an attacker, and it's going to send it off into a honeypot or into other directions, maybe towards my competitor. I'm not sure what, but there could be some interesting kind of offensive measures that we could have with AI and Gen AI.
That's a great point.
Alan, do you think this is going to wind up being like a separate category of products? And I'm asking this question because, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they were like, hey, let me get this straight. You're going to sell me this thing, and this thing isn't going to really completely do the job or work, so I got to buy this other thing. And in their analogy it's like, you want to sell me a car, but you want me to pay extra for the locks and the keys. So, is this just a feature of something in the LLM, or do you think we're going to see like this whole kind of third wave of data LLM security products that people will pay extra for?
Again, this is the natural way of thinking. First, security's bolted on, then it's built in. So it'll be bolted on for a while and it's built in. Interestingly, I'm already starting to get unsolicited spams about, let us help you build your own LLMs, right? Because right now, I think a lot of organizations don't have the wherewithal, the know-how to build their own LLMs. And so there's a cottage industry of, let us build your LLM for you. I think eventually custom LLMs and SLMs will become much more the norm than just using these massive LLMs trained by OpenAI or what have you. But right now, that's what we're stuck with, and security is going to need to be bolted on. Once you can control your own LLM, you'll also be able to control a lot more about the security of and the data in there, obviously. But it's a process, right? Like everything else in technology. My friend Damon Edwards, one of the founders of the DevOps movement, Damon always tells me it's a process. And that's what we're going through here with AI. You know, it's a process. It's an evolution. We'll get there eventually. It's going to be a little Wild West, for a time. But, so is the U.S. It happens. That's just the way of things.
Lisa, do you agree with that? Is that kind of the arc of things? And how does a tech vendor position something that is, shall we say, inherently insecure in a way that somebody wants to buy it?
Yeah, it's a great conundrum that we're living in right now. I do agree with what Alan is saying. I think that we're going to have to see the transparency, the honesty, the accountability, and the acceptance that until, to Alan's point, we can get control over the data in LLMs, we have to acknowledge that there are inherent security risks that probably, we're talking about what Immersive Labs found. There's probably so many more that we haven't found yet. And so the control factor is key, but also so is the acknowledgement that, hey, we're all still learning here together. It is going to be the wild, wild west for probably quite some time. But acknowledging that and I think being honest and truthful about that is a great thing that tech companies, and I think companies in every industry, can do, to say, we understand that there are inherent flaws here. We're working to identify as many as we can and dial it down and eradicate them.
Mitchell, am I going to need an LLM to monitor and secure my LLMs?
Well, I think that's very much a possibility. Think of this just like we have specialized humans in techniques like penetration testing and evaluating security of systems. The same thing will happen with AI. And I'm reminded of the movie Creator on Hulu. Not to give away the end of the story, but you be careful what you ask for when you meet who the creator actually is. Well, in this case, I think we're going to be using AI to create and test AI, just like we're going to do for software. We're going to do the same thing for security. Is it the panacea that's going to solve all the problems? No, it's not going to. But I think it's inevitable. To Alan's point, this is the way of things, or to The Mandalorian, this is the way.
Speaking of the way, you
way to finish strong, Mitchell. Strong,
boy. Bump.
Bonnie is usually at the forefront of using a lot of these tools. So as we discussed any of this, did it give you any sense of concern, or what's your thoughts?
I think that, it does, because there's the threat of, we're still figuring out how do we catch these cybersecurity breaches. Makes you wonder, the cybersecurity person that's the bad guy thinking of, they don't know yet how they're going to do it, and they're still figuring it out. So it's hard to be one step ahead of what they're doing. But I think it makes you more aware. But every large learning model, it definitely is influenced by, like we were saying earlier, who's programming it. So you have to kind of look at the sources, I think, too. But it's something to be aware of as you go forward, because as everyone's been saying, Al was saying, it is the Wild West. We don't know.
There you go. We're going to need pictures of the humans who created the AI so we can trust the humans, and then extend the trust to the AI. Yeah. I'm going to end this conversation here, but I am going to pass it over to Alan, who's going to explain what he's doing in Santa Clara.
Sure. Well, thanks, Mike. Actually, it's not just me, but it's Mitchell. And we're joined by, we're on a Futurum research mission here. One of the sister companies we're working with at Futurum is Tech Field Day. A Tech Field Day, for those who don't know, has been around about 15 years. It's a great program where you get like about a dozen delegates in a room, and companies come in and explain their company and their products to the delegates, and the delegates question and find out about them and probe in to see. And the whole thing is broadcast live. And as part of our relationship here with Futurum, our growing relationship, we are broadcasting live. And we'll also have it available on demand on Techstrong TV. So immediately following Techstrong Gang today, we will be broadcasting it's the App Dev Field Day. So this one's focused on App Dev. We had yesterday's show on as well, and I believe that may be already available on Techstrong TV. So do check that out. And Mitchell and I, this is our first one. So Stephen Foskett is the founder of Tech Field Day. He's been really fantastic to work with. We've got a few other Futurum folks here on the delegate panel, as well as just some awesome, smart people in app dev. So do check that out along with the rest of Techstrong TV. And we hope you enjoyed this. And Mike and Bonnie, thanks for holding down the fort back in what I assume is sunny Boca Raton. And we'll be home soon. Leave a light on.
All right, folks. Thanks for watching the latest edition. We'll see you next time.
This is going to be a story about the cost of AI, and it goes like this. Creating a large language model, that's the thing that drives AI, is really, really expensive. Dario Amati, the CEO of Anthropic, which is a very big player in the AI space, he's saying it's going to cost $1 billion to make a model. Now, to give you an idea of how much $1 billion is, if I had $1 million, it would take me 1,000 years to spend it. So that means that in 3024, I'd run out of money. And today's 2024. That's a long time. I think the long and the short of it is that, the days of somebody sitting down at a personal computer and cooking up some code that made a multi-million-dollar business, I think those days are over. It just takes a lot of money to get into the game these days. But it wasn't always that way. I mean, Microsoft got its start on the personal computer. They made the operating system DOS, which was for the IBM PC. Another one, VisiCalc, which was the first spreadsheet for a PC, was written by two programmers who I happen to be aware of, Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankston. I mean, even something as well known as Google Search was really created by 4 programmers. And, what did they need to do that? Well, they needed some PCs on their desktop. They probably needed a couple of servers and a data center, a connection to the internet. But, most importantly, they needed to be creative and they needed to use their brain. And that didn't cost a lot of money back then. Now, I know I'm being a bit nostalgic about the freedom and prosperity of the personal computer. And don't get me wrong, I'm very aware that big business needs big money. Bell Telephone, which was started by Alexander Graham Bell, the second person he hired was a guy named Thomas Sanders. And Thomas Sanders was a finance guy, the treasurer. And why did he hire a finance guy? Because Bell knew that it would take years to build a telephone system, that there would be more money going out for a very long time than coming in. So this notion of big business needing lots of money and a really high cost of entry, it's nothing new. But, I'll let you in the secret. I'm self-taught. And all it cost me to get into the game was I had to save up some money for a PC. And I had to buy some books on computer programming, and I had to have the time. But eventually I learned, and I became a professional programmer. And the profession's been very good to me. I have absolutely no complaints. But without that low cost of entry, I'd be nowhere. So, it seems to me that today, for a person to get good on a technical landscape that sort of is really being driven by AI, they're going to have to work for a big corporation, very much in the same way that IBM mainframes ruled a programming environment back in the 50s and early 60s. And I just don't know if another one of me is going to be able to come along, or, a Gates or Bricklin or, the guys at Google. when I'm not in their league by any means, but without that low cost of entry, they're just not going to be able to make it. So, I guess in order to prosper, in the future, you're not only going to need to know the in and outs of machine learning, but you're also going to have to know how to get along in a corporate environment, which is not something I've been very good at. But, it didn't really matter because all I've ever needed to get by is, a PC, a connection to the internet, and my brain and a good amount of creativity. And I've been okay. But, I'm wondering if this high cost of entry is really going to prevent some aspiring technologists to be able to even play. I really wonder about that. And, does it matter that the growing cost of AI is going to prevent this little guy from getting in? Oh, I don't know. But is it something worth thinking about? Yeah, I really think it is.